Like if you want to ask a question, don't want even your voice to be heard. That's okay. We'll turn it off. Okay, for that. Welcome to the class. Introduction to Jewish Life and Thought. This is a class that is a recurring class. It's a cycle. People don't come at the beginning necessarily. They don't stay to the end. Come whenever you wish, and stay as long as it's interesting to you. And once we get to the end, we'll start again from the beginning. So this is the first time since I've been here at the shul that we're starting again from the beginning. Okay, so it takes us about a year-ish or so to go make our way through this curriculum, and this is now, I guess, the second time here at Anshe Shalom that I'm teaching through this material again. This time, they're all going to be recorded. They'll be put up on the shul's YouTube channel, numbered. This will be class 1, the next one will be class 2, so if you miss a class, you could follow up. Some people use these classes as part of a conversion to Judaism curriculum. Some people are already Jewish and don't need that, but they're interested anyway, and whatever you wish is fine. It's great. If you're interested in a conversion to Judaism process, by now I should know that. We should have, not necessarily meaning make an appointment with me individually, and in addition to taking these classes, we should be meeting every 3 to 6 weeks just to get updated, and that process will play itself out, at the pace that makes sense. I think also, in addition to the curriculum that we'll go through, if you have questions that arise in your own Jewish lives, this would be a good chance to ask them. If you're wondering about something, somebody else might be too. So that's also fine. We can, as we go through the week, if you have questions, we can definitely answer some of them, or you can ask them now, and I'll try to answer them now. If you haven't been here before, or if you don't have anyone like one of the curriculum over, yes, so you haven't. Remind your name, sorry, one more time?
Jenny.
Jenny. Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else want? Anyone else need or want? Good. You have one? Sure. Okay. What do you want? Or you have? Or you? Good. Okay. So the first topic is sort of broad. I call it history of Torah. Okay, what do I mean by that? History of Torah, history of Halakha. How does our Jewish way of life, how does Jewish law, where does it come from? And how does it develop? How do the sources of Jewish law develop over time? So that's Roman number 1, A, pre-Sinai. Okay, if you read the Hebrew Bible, if you read Genesis in particular, and Exodus, you see there are practices, there are mitzvot, there are rituals, there are sort of distinctive Jewish practices that develop over time, that the patriarchs themselves picked up some of these practices in their own lives. We see, for example, Abraham circumcises himself and circumcises his family. For example, we see Jacob, wrestles the angel and he injures his leg, and then the Torah tells us, and from this, the children of Jacob, children of Israel, don't eat the sciatic nerve anymore, that part of the leg where Jacob was injured. So there are certain distinctive Jewish practices that emerge in the biblical narrative in Genesis that continues into Exodus as well. Nonetheless, the sort of legal authority of all of these practices is all from Sinai. The revelation at Sinai is the kind of definitional moment when the Torah, a system of laws, a way of life, became obligatory upon the Jewish people, and so whatever practices we had before then, whatever we maintained, we did. We had a history as a people from the time of Abraham, but the legal moment, the authority of our current practice all goes back to Sinai, even things that predate Sinai. Does that make sense? Okay, so even though there's a legal history, right, in the book of Genesis and the beginning of the book of Exodus, it's almost like irrelevant for us. It's sort of it's interesting as a piece of history, but it's the legal moment where Judaism was placed upon the Jewish people when the Torah was given to us. That's the moment that's the revelation at Mount Sinai, as described in the book of Exodus, as described in the book of Deuteronomy. So what is this moment at Sinai? Right. So again, not speaking that question could be answered literarily. You could read the Torah, you can see how the Torah describes Sinai, what happened there. But I guess I'm more interested right now in kind of legal theory, what legally happens at Sinai. So Rabbinic Judaism believes that there were two revelations at Sinai. There's a revelation of the written Torah and a revelation of the oral Torah. And both of these are traced back to Sinai. Now, the written Torah seems pretty simple. The written Torah is the written Torah, what we call the Hebrew Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the core of the Hebrew Bible. But even that's not so simple, because it seems from the Torah itself that the Torah was given piecemeal over 40 years in the desert. Moses would get instructions from God, would get updates from God, would get new commandments, would teach them to the people. It seems the Torah develops over Moses' lifetime. At the end of his lifetime, he has the 5 books of Moses that he gives to the people. So even the written Torah, there's some revelation moment at Sinai, but the actual book gets written over 40 years. This position is described in the Talmud already. It seems to be the position that makes the most sense, right? That accords with the account given in the Torah itself. So that's the core of the written Torah. I guess I don't want to assume too little or too much knowledge, but so I guess please interrupt if I say something that's unclear. If there's some sort of background information that you don't have, that would help what I say make sense. Okay. Written Hebrew scriptures is similar but different from the Old Testament. People aware of that? Is that yes? No? Okay. The difference is the Old Testament. First of all, the Old Testament is framed by its name, the Old Testament, which suggests that there is the New Testament, right? It's a framing, it's a Christian framing of the book to say this is the old version, and then there's the new version which upgrades and replaces. So Jews reject that framing, and so we don't speak of the Old Testament just as a name, as a category. Second, the books are edited in a different way with different agendas and different editorial processes. So there are certain books that were left out of the Hebrew Bible, which became canonical in the Christian Old Testament, especially the Catholic Old Testament, which has a lot of books that we don't have. Some of the Protestant churches took out some of those books. I guess they realized they didn't exist in Hebrew, and in an effort to kind of purify the church, they took out some of those books from the Old Testament. So a Protestant Old Testament and a Catholic Old Testament are different. They're both different from the Hebrew Bible. Okay, Hebrew Bible doesn't have all of those extra books. It also has a different order. So we divide our scriptures, our written scriptures, based on the level of authority that they have for us, the level of prophecy. The highest level is the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, which is, we believe, as a direct dictation by God to Moshe. The next stage is Nevi'im, the prophets, written in prophetic vision, but not a direct dictation, which seems to be the prophet. Maybe a prophet has a vision, but then expresses that vision in his or her own words. So there's some creative shaping of the prophecy by the prophet himself or herself. And the third category is Ketuvim, the writings, which we believe are written with some sort of divine inspiration, but are not pure, or not on that level of prophecy. It's something lower than prophecy, but still elevated writing. So those 3 sections, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, we call Tanakh. That's the acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah, prophets, writings. That's our written scripture. So the core of that, the 5 books of Moshe, 5 books of Moses, the Torah itself is this product of this unique revelation at Sinai, but we actually understand maybe that unique revelation at Sinai really is a 40-year period when Moshe is teaching Torah in the desert and giving us this written Torah. So in the ancient world, really every Jewish group, had a written Torah, had scriptures, some differences, more or less the same. Rabbinic Judaism, our ancestors, the ones who, we are their, inherit their religious vision, they also believe in the oral Torah. The oral Torah is an unwritten Torah that goes back to the time of the written Torah, and it tells us what the written Torah means, and things, and as well as details that are not in the written Torah. And this set aside Rabbinic Jews, or the predecessors or the precursors of Rabbinic Jews from other Jewish groups which denied the oral Torah, and it's crucial to how we live today, in some ways more important than the written Torah. So what is the oral Torah? So at a basic level, the oral Torah includes things like how do you read the written Torah? Right? No book, it's very postmodern if you want it. No book is conclusive or clear on its own. Every written text is subject to interpretation, and so the tradition of interpretation, that is the written Torah. That is the oral Torah, sorry. So at basic level, that means we have these words, we have these letters. How do you pronounce those letters? Hebrew is not a phonetic language. There's no vowels in Hebrew. So how do you, in certain words, can mean different things depending on which vowels how you vocalize it. So how do you read these words? That also, that's an oral tradition of how, right? A Torah scroll doesn't have any vowels, doesn't have any punctuation. Where do you divide into sentences? How do you read these words? That's a distinct oral tradition. Centuries later, like in the Middle Ages, for the first time, scholars decided, let's make notations for how these words sound to us. And they invented the vowels. Like if you are learning to read Hebrew, you'll learn with vowels. Those were invented thousands of years after, Jews were reading the Torah for thousands of years before anybody invented the vowels that you study when you study Hebrew. So without vowels, how do they know how to read the Torah? Just based on tradition, oral tradition. You hear it read, you learn how it's read, and that's how you do it. And so where the verses break, what the words sound like. Beyond that, the oral tradition tells us the legal meaning of verses in the Torah and include things that are sort of left vague in the Torah. Torah tells us to observe Shabbat, tells us very, very few details of what Shabbat observance is about. It's left to the oral Torah to fill in the details of what Shabbat, the Sabbath day, looks like. The Torah tells us that the holiday of Shavuot, which we just celebrated 2 weeks ago, is observed 50 days, Macharat HaShabbat. It says the day after the Sabbath, count 50 days. What does the day after the Sabbath mean? Maybe it means Sunday. Okay, so there were Jewish groups who thought that Shavuot was 50 Sundays after Passover. Macharat HaShabbat. After Passover, from the day after Shabbat, count 50 days. But our ancestors said no. In that verse, the oral Torah teaches us that Shabbat doesn't mean the Sabbath, doesn't mean Saturday. It means the first day of Passover, which is also like a Sabbath day. It's a day we don't work. And so we count 50 days from the first day of Passover, and that's when we observe Shavuot. So the oral Torah includes details such as that, such as how to read the written Torah in a way that makes legal sense. So we all are observing the holidays on the same day when there's ambiguity in the written Torah. Torah says things we don't know. Is it literal? Is it a metaphor? The Torah says the words of the Torah should be, write them on your doorposts. So that sounds, maybe it's a metaphor, right? We should be surrounded by the inspiring message of the Torah. No, the written Torah, the oral Torah tells us, no, that means the mitzvah of mezuzah. We actually take passages from the Torah, we write them on scrolls, and we put them on our doorposts. The oral Torah is what allows us to live our lives by the written Torah. When did the oral Torah come from? So, Rabbinic Jews believe that the oral Torah as well comes from Sinai. But there's a question as to how comprehensive that revelation at Sinai was of the oral Torah. Maybe it was God just told Moses, here's the written Torah, and here are a few details you won't know otherwise, and I want you to interpret and figure out the rest. And it was left to human discovery to kind of flesh out the fuller picture of what the oral Torah is, which is really what the written Torah means. Or perhaps God taught Moshe all the details, all the rules of how to keep Shabbat, how to observe the holidays, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a comprehensive transmission of a tradition of the oral Torah from generation to generation. Okay, written Torah, oral Torah. I'm going to pause here. Any questions? Okay. Any reactions? Okay. Stuff you've heard before, maybe, more or less? Some of you? No? Yes? No? Okay. Some of you yes, some of you no, which is great. Okay. The connection between the written Torah and the oral Torah is called Midrash. Okay. There are two types of Midrashim, of Midrash. There's Midrash Halacha, and there's Midrash Agadah. So let me talk about Midrash Agadah first. Midrash Agadah so Midrash means interpretation. That's what it means, okay? So, or exegesis, interpretation of Scripture. Midrash Agadah is the Midrashic interpretive expansion, investigation, elaboration of the narratives of the Torah. So, for example, the Torah tells about Abraham, a very important individual in Jewish history, the first Jew, the one who discovers God. The Torah tells us nothing about Abraham's childhood, tells us nothing about how he discovered God, why he was special. Abraham springs on the stage, Lech Lecha. God tells Abraham, get up and go to the land where I'm going to show you. Well, why Abraham? Who's he? What made him so special? So these are stories that are, a sensitive reader of the Torah will say, who is this guy? These are questions that emerge from a careful, close reading of the Torah, and Midrash Agadah fills in those gaps in the text, curiosities in the text, fills them in and provides details that are lacking in the Torah itself. These are, I want to say speculative. Speculative is a little bit, let's see, that's not really the word I'm looking for. Speculative suggests that it's haphazard. And it's not haphazard, it's rooted in a very careful, loving, sensitive read of the Torah, but it's not binding, right? It's not authoritative. It's some individual rabbi's position, interpretation, response to a question that comes from a careful reading of the text. That's Midrash Agadah. Midrash Halacha is the midrashic interpretation, expansion of the legal parts of the Torah. So the Torah tells us, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk 3 times. So the Midrash Halacha says these 3 times each tell us you can't cook any type of dairy with any type of meat together, nor can you eat them together once they've been cooked together, nor can you derive benefit from them once they've been cooked together. And that's what each of these 3 repetitions of Lo tevashel gedi b'chelev imo, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. A goat, right? A little goat. In its, that's Midrash Halacha. That's the expansion, the interpretation of the legal parts of the Torah to give us legal meanings. Okay, Torah tells us Torah tells us ayin tachat ayin. Torah tells us an eye for an eye. Midrash Halacha tells us that means monetary compensation. We don't actually poke people's eyes out. We estimate damage and we seek restitution, for damages in a way that's fair and equitable, and Okay. So that's Midrash Halacha. Midrash Halacha is binding in the sense that once the rabbis of the Talmudic period were the ones who either recorded the Midrashic traditions that were ancient before them, or they discovered the legal interpretation, the normative legal interpretation of these verses, and they set for all time the legal meaning of these verses. They were, like somebody said this, I forget who it was, at the Supreme Court, they're final because right and right because final. Okay? So you can't, so you can read the Torah and come up with creative new ways of understanding it, but Shavuot is going to be counted from 50 days after the first day of Passover, and don't boil a kid in its mother's milk means you can't cook, eat, or derive benefit from meat and dairy that have been cooked together. Like that's set already. Even if you offer the gates of interpretation are open, you're welcome to offer a new interpretation, a new insight, based on archaeology, based on literary theory, based on your perceptive understanding of the entire of biblical Hebrew, whatever it might be. That's fine, it's wonderful, but legally we have to have some stability. And so once the rabbis of the Talmudic era determined this is what this verse means legally, that's what that verse means legally. And the endeavor, that connection between the oral Torah, what we do, our laws, And the written Torah, that's called Midrash Halacha. And there are books of this, right? There are ancient collections of Midrash Halacha on the various legal portions of the Torah. So far, so good? Okay. I think in the section I have a reading that Jay Harris wrote a book, How Do We Know This? Wonderful, wonderful book on the history of people thinking about Midrash Halacha. Okay? Because this is something that Jews have wondered. Jews, we read the Torah and we look at our lifestyle and we see that it's not always so obvious, the connection between what we do and the biblical verses that we derive that from. And so as Jews have wondered about that and pondered it, they've developed theories of Midrash Halacha. And the book is a wonderful history of those theories, and it's a great, great book. So the oral tradition was passed on from teacher to student, from Moses to, who was Moses' student? Yeshua, Joshua, who passed it on to his students, who passed it on through the period of the judges, through the period of the kings of Israel, and the prophets who lived in those times. Passed on. People know Jewish history a little bit, right? Torah describes the journey from Egypt to the land of Israel. Moshe dies. After Moshe dies, Joshua leads a conquest of the land of Israel. Judges, chieftains rule for several centuries. Kings then rule for several centuries. Year 586 BCE, the Babylonian army conquers the Jewish kingdom, destroys Jerusalem. Many of the Jews are taken to exile to Babylonia, where most of them stay there and never leave. The Iraqi Jewish community, which is at the moment is very small, but until the 20th century it was a very large community. They are the direct descendants of those Jews who were exiled into Babylonia in 586 BCE. But some of them came back to the land of Israel 70 years later when the Persians conquered the Babylonian Empire. They rebuilt Jerusalem, they rebuilt the temple. After the Persian period, the Persian Empire in the Middle East is overturned by Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great conquers, he lived around the year 200 BCE, more or less. That's Alexander, I think. Okay, he conquers the land of Israel and everything else. His death, his empire split into his three sons: the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, and the so it doesn't matter. The important ones were the Seleucids and the Ptolemies because they're the ones who fought over the land of Israel after his death. Then you have the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabean kingdom, which wasn't such a kingdom. They didn't have so much independence, and eventually the brothers are the Maccabee kingdom. You have brothers fighting over the throne, and they invite the Romans to come in and help sort things out for them, and the Romans come in and never leave. Mark Antony conquers Palestine in the end of the Hasmonean period, the Maccabean period. In the year 70 of the Common Era, there's a Jewish rebellion against Rome, and in the course of that rebellion, and crushing that rebellion, the temple is destroyed. As the temple is destroyed, before it's destroyed, Jerusalem's under siege. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sneaks out of Jerusalem, goes to the Roman general, calls him emperor. He says, I'm not the emperor, I'm just the general. Just then the messenger comes up and says, no, you just become the emperor. The Senate voted, you're the emperor now. And he goes, oh, this guy knows stuff. This guy knows something. What can I do for you? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, give me Yavne v'chachamea. Let me establish a school in Yavne. And Vespasian says, okay. So Jerusalem is destroyed, the temple is destroyed, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is enabled to build a school in Yavne. And so Torah continues. And he has students and teaches them Torah. Around the year 200, there was a concern that the oral Torah could be lost. Somehow there was a fear that this process, which had survived a great deal of destruction and dislocation, somehow it couldn't be guaranteed into the future, and so the decision was made to commit the oral Torah to writing. And the sort of prime work in this endeavor of committing the oral Torah to writing is a book that we know as the Mishna. Mishna is edited by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi around the year 200 of the Common Era. Things are actually pretty good then with the Romans. The Romans gave, Nasi means he was the the patriarch, the chieftain, the prince, which was a position that the Romans gave him. Right? He was a political position over the Jews in Roman Palestine. And he's also a great scholar. So he had like political power and he had scholarship, and he thought it was time to take the oral Torah, to collect the oral Torah, and to edit it and to produce this work called the Mishna. So the Mishna is a sort of basic editing of the oral Torah. I should show you some Mishnah. So Mishnah exists in English translation. You could actually, my wife works for a company called Sefaria.org, SEFARIA.org, and they have the entire Mishnah now with English translation as well. So meaning there are English translations that are under copyright, and there are English translations that are not under copyright, and Sefaria has one that's not under copyright, so you can, I don't know, like print out lots of copies of the English Mishnah. But these are the, okay, so to sort of see, I don't know, I sort of pass. Mishnah is divided to, sorry, I'll pass it over. The Mishnah is divided into 6 sections. They're called orders, starim. So what are they? There's Seder Zurayim, the order of seeds, which is all about the agricultural mitzvot. The Torah has lots of rules about agriculture, so Seder Zurayim is the details of all of those laws of agriculture. Very, very detailed, specific, particular details. It also includes the section Brachot, which is a major source for our liturgy, because we say blessings over different foods that we eat that grow in different places in different ways. And so that's why the tractate Brachot, which is a major source of the Jewish prayer book and our liturgy, is there in Seder Zurayim. Next, we have there's actually an order to the order of Mishnah, which I don't recall, so I'm just going to tell you all 6, different order, okay? Nashim is about women, which is marriage and divorce and more complicated versions of marriage and divorce. And it, all the different topics pertaining to there. Third, Nizikin. Nizikin is damages. So it's, my ox, gores your bull, my fire burns down your field, I punch you in the face and knock out your tooth, and those types of rules, as well as commerce laws, what's improper usury, what's counts as economic exploitation, if I charge too much for goods or services, court procedures, testimony, contracts, acquisition, okay, that's Nizikin. As well as punishments for crimes are also in that Seder, that order. That's Rayim, Nashim. Moed. Moed is the holidays, Sabbath and the holidays. This goes through the calendar year, all the laws of the festivals, the Jewish calendar, and the details. Next, Kachim. What?
You say the same Kedushim.
Right. Kachim is the sacrificial order, all the different sacrifices that were brought in the temple and their details. Now, the temple had been destroyed for generations when the Mishnah was edited, but it's part of the oral Torah. We have mitzvah and Torah, and the oral Torah also includes these topics, and so we have Kachim. And one more is Taharot. Taharot is purity regulations. The Torah has a very, very, very elaborate system, rules of purity and impurity. People and things can contract impurity through proximity or contact with corpses and other things as well, and transfer that impurity to other people and things and objects. And all of these rules regulate access to the temple and access to sacred food. Right? Sacrifice an animal, it's a sacrifice, part of it you get to eat. You can only eat it if you're in a state of purity. You only go to the temple if you're in a state of purity. So all of the regulations about which objects can become impure and how you purify them and how impurity is spread. You have a dead person in a tent, everything in the tent is impure. What if you have a closed container, sealed vessel in a tent with a dead guy? What about what's inside the container? Is that impure or not? How does it spread? How does it, etc.? Since there's no temple, almost all of these rules now are no longer part of our daily life, but it's a major, major focus of the Torah, and it's 1/6 of the Mishnah deals with these topics, and that's Seder Taharot. So the subject matter of the Mishnah, each Seder, each order is divided into Mesechtot, which we translate as tractates. I don't really know what that word means in any other context other than this one, but book, I don't know, Mesechet, I don't know, right? Tractate. It's like a book within a Seder, okay? So, some examples. All right. So this is the Mishnah Bava Kama. So this is the first, the beginning of Nizikin, the Seder that deals with damages. I'm just reading a few, chapter 3, Mishnah 2. Ashofech mayim b'rshut harabim v'huzak behen acher chayav niska. You spill water in the public domain, somebody else slips and injures himself, the person who spilled the water is obligated to pay the damages. Mitzniat hakotz v'yatzis chochitz v'agoderet g'dira b'kotzim v'gadir shenafal b'rshut harabim v'huzku behen acharim chayav v'zikin. If you conceal, you hide a thorn or a piece of glass, you make your fence out of thorns. Or your fence is made of regular things, but it falls onto the public domain, someone's injured, you are responsible for the damage that you caused. Two potters are walking one behind the other. The first one stumbles and fell, the second one stumbles over the first one. The first one is liable for the injuries of the second guy. Okay? Chapter 10, Mishnah 4. One came with his jug of wine, another came with his pitcher of honey. The pitcher of honey cracked, and this one poured out his wine and saved the honey with it. He has only his hire, and if he said, I will save yours, but you pay me the value of mine, he's obligated to pay him. Get the case? Right? I have wine, you have honey. So your jar shatters, and your honey is slowly dripping out of your jar. So I take my barrel of wine and go, whoosh, empty it, and then I rescue your honey. So I want compensation for the wine. And we said, no, like no one asked you to throw out your wine. You can get compensation for the time that you invest in helping your friend, but you're not going to get your wine back unless, as the honey is dripping out of the jar, you say, oh, let's make an arrangement. I'll throw out my wine and I'll rescue your honey. This only makes sense if honey is more valuable than wine, which pound for pound, honey actually is probably more. Right? You know, a jug of honey is probably worth more than a quantity of wine that much, right? So it depends on the wine. But okay, so that's that. Okay, I'm going to pass this around. You can sort of flip through. I just want you to get a sense of like what the style of the Mishnah, as well as a bit of the subject matter. Here is Sanhedrin. Kate said, how do we examine, this is chapter 3, Mishnah 6. How do they cross-examine witnesses? They brought them into the chamber, they admonished them, and they sent forth outside every man of them to retain the eldest among them and said to him, state how do you know that this one is in debt to the other? If he said, he stated to me, or I am in debt to him, or so-and-so told me that he was in debt to him, he has said nothing, unless he can say he admitted before us to him that he owed him 200 zuz. Okay? Etc., etc. So court procedures, okay? A friend or an enemy is ineligible to be a witness. You can't testify on behalf of your friend because you're going to be impartial. You can't testify on behalf of your enemy, you're going to be impartial. Okay, so you can pass this around as well. Just again, a sense of style, a sense of subject matter. This is Moed. This is this one is holidays. In the times of the ancient times, they would declare the new moon after seeing the new moon in the sky. So the month would be determined. The Hebrew calendar, the months are lunar. Witnesses would see the moon in the sky, the new moon, the sliver of moon. Now it's the new month, and they would now we have to let everyone know that it's the new month. If they didn't see if the witnesses didn't come, the month would begin the next day. It wasn't like a total variation because it could be cloudy for a week, but they would either be the months either had 29 or 30 days, and that was dependent on if witnesses came forward that they saw the sliver of moon in the sky. If they didn't, the month would begin the next day, which means that you didn't know when your holidays would occur until you had word from the court in Jerusalem that they have accepted these witnesses' testimony. So they would send out messengers to the entire, the whole Jewish world to let people know it's the beginning of the month of Nisan. Passover is in another 14 days. for example, maybe. Hold on, so I can find another one. Here, let me show you. Here, Sukkah. Sukkah, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Sukkashi gvua milamala mi'asrim amah psula. Rehuda machshir. A sukkah, the booth we sit in on the holiday of Sukkot, it is taller than 20 amot, 20 cubits, it's invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says it's fine. She'ein gvua asrat tvachim, v'she'ein la shlosha devanot, v'shechamtam ru b'tzilta psula. If it is not 10 handbreadths tall, it's invalid. And if it doesn't have 3 walls, and if there's more sun than shade coming through the roof, it's invalid. Sukkah yishana, Beit Shammai poslim Beit Hillel machshir, an old sukkah from last year that you left standing. Beit Shammai, the school of Shammai says it's no good. The school of Hillel says it's fine. Ve'ezohi sukkah yishana. What is this old sukkah? Kol she'asa'a kodem l'chag shoshim. Anything that was built 30 days before Sukkot. But if it was built for the purpose of Sukkot, it can be built whenever, beginning of the year, that's fine. If it was built for some other purpose, like you built a gazebo more than 30 days before Sukkot, that's no good according to Beit Shammai. According to Beit Hillel, it doesn't matter. The school of Hillel, it's all fine. Okay, here is that Mishnah. You can pass those around as well to get a sense of the Mishnah. So what are some characteristics of the Mishnah? Maybe you can see just from these 3 quick examples. How is this different? What did you notice? More than one opinion. The Mishnah preserves multiple opinions. It's not a law code because it preserves more than one opinion. Just the Mishnah we saw that really clearly in the Mishnah that we just saw. Almost every chapter of Mishnah includes machloket, includes disputes. It's really one of the only ancient religious texts that preserve disputes. It's not a law code in that way, or it's not so helpful as a law code since you don't know which opinion is right. Preserves more than one opinion. Anything else that you noticed? Does it tell you reasons for things? Does it tell you origins for things? Does it tell you the source for things? No. It's very apodictic. Like this is this, and that is that, and you do this, and you do that. Rabbi X says this, Rabbi Y says that. We're done. Very matter of fact, very apodictic, short, declarative statement of positions. Multiple opinions included, but without resolution, but no discussion, no analysis, no conceptualization, and no derivation, no connection of the rules to any source, whether it's a biblical source, whether it's a rabbinic source, none of that at all. Okay? That is the Mishnah. Therefore, from the time the Mishnah was edited, scholars have asked those kinds of questions about the Mishnah. Okay? How do we know this? It says this here, but here's another really old source that says something contradictory. How do we know who's right, Rabbi Yehuda or the anonymous first voice in the Mishnah about the Tal Sukkah? How do we define a cubit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? These questions sort of emerge from the Mishnah itself, and the focus on the Mishnah gives rise to further scholarship. That further scholarship is what became the Talmud. For several hundred years, following the publication of the Mishnah, rabbis studied the Mishnah and asked those types of questions about the Mishnah, and those conversations eventually, centuries later, became the Talmud. So let me show you what Talmud looks like. I'm going to grab from the shelf. I'm looking for one of the Talmud passages that we've been. Actually, that. It's not there, never mind. Okay. Okay. The way the Talmud is printed, the Talmud is printed as an extended conversation about the Mishnah. So, hold this up, you can pass it around. You see there's a large mem for Mishnah. And you have a couple of lines of the Mishnah. Okay? Because the Mishnah, again, they're short, they're broke up into little pieces. So that's a Mishnah. And then here's Gemara. Gemara means Talmudic discussion, learning around that Mishnah. And that begins here and goes all the way down to the bottom of this page. And then it continues all the way on this page, and all the way on this page. It's all that one Mishnah, just those like 7 or 8 lines. So all the way on this page, all the way on this page, lots and lots of discussion about that's a good Mishnah, okay? A lot to say about it. And actually that one then ends the chapter. Oh, you know what? Yeah. Sanhedrin is written different. Sanhedrin, the Mishnah, is printed all together, and then there's lots of, so it's not a good example. And a better example. Hold on. Here we are. Okay, look. Here. There's a Mishnah, 2 lines. There's a couple of lines Gemara discussing that Mishnah. Here's the next Mishnah, which goes another like 1 or 2 lines. The Gemara then discusses that Mishnah down the bottom of this page. And then to here. Here's the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah goes a couple of lines, and the Gemara continues. Here's the next Mishnah right here. This Mishnah goes a couple of lines. The Gemara picks up. Gemara is the Talmudic, again, discussion around the Mishnah. Okay, so, I don't know if the passage I want to take a look at, get a sense of the story. So, the Mishnah itself, the Mishnah is simple, the Mishnah is straightforward, the Mishnah is apodictic. The Talmudic discussion around the Mishnah asks all those questions that the Mishnah itself doesn't ask. What are the excluded categories? If the law is X in case A, and the law is Y in case B, what's the law in case C? Okay? How do we know this? What's the biblical source? What's the derivation? Let's work that the meaning of the implication of these verses to connect these rules to the Torah's verses. And we have other early sources, early sources that didn't make it into the Mishnah. These are called Baraitot. Baraitot are early sources from the same time as the Mishnah that were left out of the Mishnah. But the Talmud quotes them and studies them and uses them to challenge the Mishnah to get deeper truth. That's the Talmud. Questions so far? That's a lot. I sort of summarized. It's like about 1,000 years of history in like 10 minutes. I would say the best way to really get a sense of this is to really it's hard to talk about it, you have to do it. So I encourage you to find opportunities in your life for studying Talmud. Yes?
As far as the Mishnah is concerned, what do you think are some of the main points to take away as sort of the average observant Jew would really need? Or is it something that really you just sort of do more in-depth studying on your own? But
yeah, I think Mishnah is a great thing to study because you don't have to do it all that in-depth because it's fairly simple, and
right.
I would say
it seems long, and I mean, when you're looking at it, sort of how much may you?
So if you read two Mishnahs a day, 7 days a week, so I think in like 2.5 years to do the whole thing.
You read, okay. Yeah.
Right, that's pretty cool, right?
They have it in English?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the Talmud and the Gemara.
Talmud and Gemara do exist in English, yes. Yes, we do. And there are several translations in English. One that's completely I'll show you.
Is it like Bavli or?
Bavli, so let me go back. So this process of Talmud, taking the Mishnah, interpreting it, expanding it, creating Talmud, that actually happened twice in Jewish history. The first time it happened was in Roman Palestine. That's called the Palestinian Talmud or the Jerusalem Talmud. The second time it happened was in Babylonia, right? This large Jewish community that stayed in Babylonia. They made like the better Talmud. It's called the Talmud Bavli. That's the Talmud that became much more popular in later Jewish history. We'll talk about later why that happened, why the Babylonian Talmud became supreme. One simple, it's edited better, but there are other reasons as well. So the Talmud Bavli is another, that when people say the Talmud, they really mean the Babylonian Talmud. That's like, so one edition in English, here's Sukkah, okay, so this is the Artswell Publishing Company in New York, maybe, 5 or 6 years ago, completed an English translation of the Talmud. They sort of preserve the traditional, pagination. The shaded bit here is the translation on this page. So they have a lot of footnotes, they fill it in, they give you a lot of, so they hold your hand and take you through it. So you don't have to have there's a glossary. You can open Talmud with this and make your way through. There's another, I think, very nice translation that is not complete yet, but it's sort of being published a volume every couple of months that the current publishing company is doing. I think it's in some ways a clearer, simpler translation that I'm very partial to, and it's not done yet, but they'll be done in the next 5 years, and they're just putting out a new volume every couple of months. There are, here in the congregation and many hundreds of other locations around the world, there are Jews who study one page of Talmud every day in a synchronized, organized fashion. We have a group that does that here at the synagogue every weekday morning. You're welcome to join us any weekday morning after our morning services, and you do it for a couple of weeks. You'll, do a page a day. Again, do a page a day of the Babylonian Talmud. You'll finish the whole thing in 7.5 years. And so this is a new thing. It's like the first time anyone thought to do this was in the 1930s. There was a rabbi in Poland who said, let's unite world Jewry by everyone agreeing to study one page of Talmud per day, and it should be the same page, and we'll have a schedule. And so since then, every time you finish 7.5 years, it's like a big deal. The last one was done in 2012. There was they rented out the MetLife Stadium in the Netherlands. There were 90-something thousand people there celebrating, and people in locations all over the world celebrating simultaneously. Yes?
So for those such things, are the orders on the sacrifices and the purity, is that,
Good question. So there is, so the Talmud doesn't exist for every part of the Mishnah. There's only Talmud for those sections of the Mishnah that were studied in the academies in Babylonia or the academies in the land of Israel. So there are things they studied in the land of Israel they didn't study in Babylonia, and so there's Talmudic tractates in the Palestinian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, that don't exist in the Babylonian Talmud. And there are certain topics they didn't study anywhere. So we don't have Talmud on every section of the Mishnah, but so the ones that are not practical, as a rough rule, the ones that are no longer observed don't have as much Talmud on, but it's not a fast rule. Like parts of Kachim, the sacrificial order, there is Talmud for that. Even though it wasn't practical, it was still studied and revered as part of our tradition. And so there is Talmud for some of those sections, but not all. Like the purity rules don't have much Talmud, only some little pieces of it have Talmud for it. That's a good question. Mishnah is a great thing to study. Even just like one tractate, Masechet Sukkah will not take you very long. You could sit down, you could read the whole thing in a couple hours. You could spread it out over a week or two, and you'll just get a great overview about what are the topics. You're not going to get the details, you're not going to get the nitty-gritty, you're not going to get the analysis, but you'll get here's a holiday, which has several mitzvot associated with it in the Torah, and let me get an overview of what it looks like. And so learning Mishnah is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and if you do it in small bites, it's very easily digestible, and a little bit a day you can really get great overviews. It's just wonderful. Talmud is a little harder, but if you can't come here in the mornings to try that out for a week or two, you can. There are tons and tons and tons of resources online of Talmud lectures you can listen to and subscribe to, and just amazing resources. So it's So I would encourage you to kind of evaluate yourself or experiment or explore that. Any Any other question? Questions, comments so far? Let's say a little bit more. The rabbis of the early stage of Rabbinic history, the Talmudic period, are known as Tanaim. These are the rabbis, these generations of scholars are the ones whose names appear in the Mishna and Tanaitic literature, okay, other Rabbinic literature of those time periods. Okay, so starting Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's around the year 70, up until Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi edits the Mishnah in around the year 200. Those generations, those are Tanaim. People like Rabbi Akiva, we may have heard of, or Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, maybe you've heard of. Rabbi Gamliel, yes, these people you may have what?
Rish Lakish?
No.
No.
Nope. Rabbi Hoshua, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Eliezer, these are Rabbi Meir, these are Tanaim. These are the generations, from Yochanan ben Zakkai up until the time of the Mishnah's edited. Their names appear in the Mishnah. They are the transmitters of the oral Torah up until the time of the Mishnah. Once the Mishnah is edited and these further discussions start, the scholars are now called Amoraim, and these are several generations of scholars from the time the Mishnah is edited up until we no longer have people mentioned by name in the Talmud. So these are people like Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Rav, Shmuel, Rav Ashi, Abaye, Rava. Right? Some of them lived in the land of Israel, some of them lived in Babylonia. At some point, the Talmud stops recording these people's names. I think most scholars now feel the Talmud itself was edited a number of generations after, meaning several generations after we stopped preserving people's attributed, named statements in the Talmud. The actual editing together of the Talmud took place in a process that academics study, and I know relatively little about, but that's sort of, I think, the basic storyline. But again, Amoraim, those are these guys with names who appear in the Talmud, the post-Mishnah part of the Talmud. So those are the two major stages of Rabbinic history, Talmudic history, the Tanaim and the Amoraim. Tanaites and Amorites, if you want. Maybe we'll stop here, because it's about, I can speak for a long time, and it's a good stopping place in terms of just content-wise. But any other questions or reactions? People, hopefully a mixture. Great. So let's set it next time to meet. That may be challenging because my schedule is erratic for a couple of weeks. So we meet between 1 and 3 times a month on Tuesday. That's sort of how this class works. Tuesday the 9th, I can't do. Tuesday the 16th, I can't do. Tuesday the 23rd, Tuesday the 23rd is the week before I'm leaving town for vacation. Should we meet then? What's this? You know what? Let's not meet then because I have some other things that week. I'm sorry. So I want to keep that evening available for other things. I'm so sorry. So we're not going to be Tuesday 23rd, which means that I'm then going to be away. Oh no, yeah. Oh, we can meet Tuesday the 30th. I can't be here because I have other commitments already. I'm sorry. Tuesday, July 7th. I'm not here. Tuesday, July 14th. Tuesday, July 14th looks good. Okay, I'm sorry it's a long time from now, but I can certainly meet then. So when we can meet 7 again, is that okay time? Is that work for people?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So take care everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.